My lords, many of your lordships were present a little earlier today when we met in the Royal Gallery to honour the noble Lord Shinwell on the occasion of his 100th birthday. But I am sure that none of your lordships would wish this unique event to pass without the opportunity for us to pay tribute to the noble lord in the House itself. The noble Lord Shinwell, has been a member of your lordship's house since 1970. Before that, he had a distinguished career in another place, stretching back as far as 1922, when he was first elected as member for Linlithgow. My lords, there are those of us in this house who may have been alive at this time. There are those of us in this house who may remember that year, but there are many who will not, my lords. During his time in another place, the noble lord served for many years as a government minister, notably as Minister of Fuel and Power, Secretary for War, and later Minister of Defence between 1945 and 1951. When he came to this House, at the age of 85, he began a second career as a parliamentarian. He has become known as an orator who, speaking without any notes, can still hold your lordships spellbound. The warmth of the affection in which the noble lord is held in all parts of your lordship's house is clearly shown by the number of your lordships who are present here this afternoon to pay tribute to him, and who were present earlier in the Royal Gallery. It is particularly fortunate that the noble lord's birthday falls on a day when this House is sitting, so that he's been able to mark the occasion by taking his usual seat in the House. I think I can say without fear of contradiction that the noble lord is the first member of either House of Parliament to have sat in Parliament on his 100th birthday. Indeed, so far as I've been able to discover, only 2 other peers have lived to be 100, and neither of them ever took their seat in this House. My lords, it is fitting that this week we are sitting for the first time under the newly restored ceiling of this chamber. It was, I am told, the boss above the noble Lord Shinwell's seat, whose dramatic fall demonstrated the urgent need for the ceiling to be restored. I am delighted that the noble lord is in his place today, but not nearly as delighted as I am that he was not in his place on the occasion of the fall. I hope the noble lord will be able to continue to sit in greater safety under the new ceiling, and that we shall continue to hear his inimitable contributions to your lordship's debates. My lords, as leader of your lordship's house for a very short time, I have learnt that I have many privileges as well as duties. But none of my privileges could ever give me greater pleasure, nor any of my duties greater satisfaction than this opportunity to pay this tribute to a great parliamentarian on what is a most remarkable occasion.
My lords, it is a privilege to endorse the felicitous tribute paid by the noble Viscount to my noble friend, and on behalf of the opposition, I would like to congratulate my noble friend upon yet another significant achievement. From his very earliest days, and they were days of hardship and struggle and self-education, my noble friend has been engaged in the give and take of political life in this country. And as the House knows so well, he is still capable of making the perceptive contribution, and if he feels like it, delivering the shrewd blow. My noble friend's long lifespan spans the most fascinating period in our history. In the year of his birth, in 1884, Queen Victoria ruled securely. Mr. Gladstone was Prime Minister. And the Fabian Society was founded. Karl Marx also died in that year. I make no connection between the two events, but I know that my noble friend does not see eye to eye with everything that great man said. Within the broad framework of the British Labour tradition, my noble friend has exercised a great deal of independence, and this has been one of his most notable characteristics, although it has not always pleased everybody, but that has never deterred my noble friend. I know that my noble friend was never a Methodist, but he has seemed to stand for the proposition that Labour owes more to Methodism than it does to Marxism. As he himself has said, he chose Parliament, not the barricades. I note that the great political issue of 1884 was Gladstone's representation of the People's Act, and that the Times reported that the Conservatives have shifted their ground so often that it is difficult to discard the suspicion that this constitutional objection is only one more phase of a fundamental distaste for all enlargement of the electorate. Be that as it may, I know that noble lords opposite are glad that the electorate was enlarged to include my noble friend and to enable him to become the member of another place in 1922. My noble friend came in as one of a group of remarkable men, and he has been in the forefront of British political life for 62 years. It is by any standards a remarkable achievement, and one we are right to celebrate. That group of Clydesiders, as they were called, was controversial and politically aggressive. My noble friend could at that time be said to have a militant tendency. But notwithstanding their conviction and their crusading zeal, my noble friend and his colleagues developed and retained a respect for parliamentary democracy. And I do not think that he would wish for a greater tribute today than to be called a great parliamentarian. Indeed, my noble friend's principles were apparent in his maiden speech on the 23rd of November 1922, when he said that working people are determined to bring pressure on the government in a constitutional way, to do the kind of things which are absolutely essential for national and individual well-being. Throughout his long and distinguished career, my noble friend has not departed from that principle. He has not forgotten the rock from whence he was hewn, and he is a worthy representative of that generation which brought the Labour Party to government in Britain. My noble friends and I value him and wish him well. I can do no better than quote from his own biography. My noble friend wrote, "There are a great many features of society that are encouraging, and there is nature itself to look at, to think about, to explore, books to be read, stories to be heard, and above all, there are the arguments and differences of opinion honestly expressed. We hope that he will have more time to do all these things, and we wish my noble friend a many happy returns of the day."
Lords, we on these benches join wholeheartedly in saluting the noble Lord Shinwell and congratulating him most sincerely on his long parliamentary career and on his 100th birthday. Speaking for myself, I did not have the honor and the opportunity of working with him in another place, either as colleague or as opponent. But I did share one experience with the noble Lord Shinwell, which showed the nature of the man and the appreciation of his qualities, which I would like today to reveal to your lordships. It was at the time of the Yom Kippur War. There was a great meeting in Trafalgar Square because of that war. And as it was a Sunday afternoon, I had been delegated by my party to represent the Liberals on that occasion. And the other parties, including myself, we had said our piece. And then the noble Lord Shinwell, took the rostrum with a crowded audience filling Trafalgar Square. And the whole of that audience of Jewish people from London, from the home counties, and from far beyond, were plainly electrified by his appearance and his voice. And as he spoke, he gave them his courage and his leadership, as he has given to his party and to his supporters for so very long. And they gave him, as we give him today, their admiration and their love.
My lord.
On behalf of my noble friend, Lord Diamond, who regrettably is unable to be here today, I would wish to extend to the noble Lord Shinwell our felicitations and happy wishes on achieving 100 years. I speak in the dual capacity on behalf of the party which had 9 members at that time in the House in which he served, who are now in this party, and as his whip for 15 years. 9 of those 15 years I was his chief whip. And if anyone thinks it's easy to be chief whip for Manny Shinwell, I would respectfully suggest that they think again. He was always very loyal. He infrequently disagreed. But finally, you could rely on him accepting the discipline which existed in the party. May I be permitted just one short anecdote of those days? In the 50s, probably about 52 or 3, the National Executive of the Labour Party were conscious of the fact that so many people who were trying to get on the lists of prospective parliamentary candidates that they were worried about some of them, and they set up a small committee to decide whether or not this name or that name should be put on the list and whether or not these people should be interviewed or not. And that small committee of 3 people were composed of a lady whose name will be remembered by very many, the late Mrs. Bessie Braddock, by myself and by the noble Lord Shinwell, or Manny, as we called him in those days and still do. What I'm never quite sure of these days is if, Manny, we did a good job. That is to say, if we let people in we should have kept out, and we kept people out whom we should have left in. We shall never know, but it was one of the little chores that one does for any political party from time to time. We hope on these benches that he will live for very many years, that he will join us in this House, regaling us with his experiences and contributing honestly, as he always does, to probably one of the most important of all of our subjects, that is the importance of defence. It's a pleasure to be here and speak in praise of Manny.
My lords, my lords, today is one of the occasions when we on the crossbenches can be united in joining the congratulations and the celebrations on this happy and memorable occasion of the noble Lord's centenary. A wise man said, "The art of living is the art of using experience, your own and other people's." This noble lord, who is a very independent thinking patriot, has confirmed this in full measure. Last Sunday, a friend reminded me of the occasion when 2 colleges were playing rugby, St. John's and Emmanuel College. St. John's were winning, and at half-time the Salvation Army band came onto the ground and playing, oh come, Emmanuel." Emmanuel then won, and the crowd roared. But, my lords, we on the crossbenches hope that the noble lord will come again and give the House the benefit of his very vast experience.
My lords, in the unavoidable absence of the Most Reverend the Primate, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and at his request, may I have the privilege of speaking from our benches for a brief moment to add our congratulations to Lord Shinwell on this centenary of his first century. And to get this remarkable event into perspective, I have in fact, my lords, done some ecclesiastical research. Now, the Lord Shinwell was, of course, born on St. Luke's Day today, and for 100 years has been the despair of the doctors, and most of them had to go into bankruptcy because he just goes on and on, although he was kind enough to speak warmly of them in the royal chamber. But a very proper day to start, at the centre of what my grandmother called St. Luke's little summer, with the sun shining in these days. But in my research, my lords, I've discovered that the Lord Shinwell has in fact lived through the reigns, if that might be the right word to use, of 9 archbishops of Canterbury, of 10 archbishops of York, of 9 bishops of London, and from East Anglia, where I come from, as the Bishop of Norwich, 5 bishops of Norwich. We are rather a long-living lot in that glorious part of the world, its wide skies, etc., etc., etc. Not for now a constituency speech. But he appears to have lived a very long time in the relationship to our work in the church. 5 bishops of Norwich. I am, of course, an hereditary abbot, and so that counts for 2, making 10 from our part of the world. But during Lord Shinwell's lifetime, therefore, he appears to have matched and outlived the 33 prelates and primates of these 4 ancient sees, amongst, of course, many other sees, like Lincoln and Derby, represented here today. And I think that the Lord Shinwell is so knowledgeable that he knows that when I seek to link these faltering words from these benches with the most reverent, the primate, the Archbishop of Canterbury, I'm not just speaking for the primate of England, that's the Archbishop of York, but the primate of all England, that's the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the difference is that the primate of all England can wear a yellow protective helmet in Canterbury Cathedral, where bosses sometimes drop from ceilings. He can wear a protective yellow helmet in York Minster, where unidentified theological thunderbolts fall at times, as was seen in the press. And so there's a sense in which we from these benches have a very broad outreach of affection towards Lord Shinwell. And his name, of course, Emmanuel, mentioned already, spans both Old Testament and New Testament, speaks for the great phrase, God is with us, and from these benches, with affection and with admiration, we would say to him, God bless you, and may God be with you into your 2nd century.
All right, my lords, I think it is fitting, if you wish.
My lords, might I say a few words to Manny Shinwell, whom I've known since 1922. I first chaired a meeting in South Shields when he came to support William Lauder, who afterwards became Sir William Lauder. I spoke with him in the 1926 miners' strike. I was 2 weeks in his election when he fought Ramsay MacDonald, when he beat him by over 20,000, and Ramsay MacDonald didn't turn up to the count. He supported me in 1945 when I was made a member of Parliament, and I sat on the committee when he nationalised the mines. And over 40 years in Parliament, I've been a close associate of our great friend Manny Shinwell.
He helped to form the Labour Party, and in all the ups and downs of politics, he stood by the party all the way. And all I can say to him as a friend, and I say it sincerely, in the words of Robbie Bones, he was a poor man's friend, one of the greatest and the best. If there's another world, he lived in bliss. And if there's not, he did his best in this. I hope he lives for many years.
My lords, I think it is fitting that someone from these benches should also pay a short tribute to the noble Lord Shinwell on this historic occasion, and that I should try to express the admiration and affection that those of us on these benches hold for the noble lord. We admire his capacity for hard hitting, for fighting hard for the causes in which he believes, and we also feel an affection for one of the most lovable characters in this house. My lords, my noble friend, the leader of the house, mentioned among other things the noble Lord Shinwell's tenure as Secretary of State for War. And I know that throughout the army, though there was perhaps a little surprise at his appointment, there grew a deep gratitude to him for the way he was prepared in the far from easy circumstances at the time to fight hard for the army and all it stood for. And that belief and faith in our defense services has, as those of us who have heard his most recent speeches know, remained with him all through these long years. My lords, I recall standing alongside the noble lord in Palace Yard on the occasion of the wedding of Her Present Majesty, and when for the first time the household cavalry appeared out of the November mists, wearing full dress uniform for the first time for 8 or 9 years. Nothing could restrain the enthusiasm of the noble Lord Shinwell for that sight, and the pleasure that he felt, I think, at having seen to it that those pre-war splendors were returned to that splendid regiment. And so, my lords, I join with other noble lords who have spoken in wishing the noble lord many years more of service in this house and of good health, and that we, and I put this quite selfishly, may have the pleasure of hearing many more of those splendid speeches of his, with hardly a word of which we agree, but every word of which we enjoy.
Lord, may I please be pardoned from these backbenches for making a personal reference to the noble lord. Some years ago, he visited Europe in his capacity as the Secretary for Defence. There was a disturbed state in Europe at that time. My son, then in the Intelligence Corps, was deputed to walk 2 paces behind the noble lord with his hand on his revolver to ensure the noble lord's safety. Lord Shinwell is still here, so I think he did his duty, my son did his duty.
My lords, I should like to associate myself, first of all, with all the tributes of affection and admiration that have been paid to the noble Lord Shinwell. At the same time, I should like to make a little practical proposition, and that is that we should commend the name of the noble Lord Shinwell to those gentlemen who select the cricketers who defend our skill in that game on foreign soil, because the noble lord has shown a capacity for centuries which has not been equally conspicuous in
Lords, the organs of communication in your lordship's house have always been regarded as highly efficient. even the most critical of members have been afforded moderate satisfaction. But I must confess that to me something appears to have gone wrong this afternoon. According to the information conveyed to me, the speeches were regarded as unnecessary. Possibly a word of commendation, high, low, or perhaps moderate on one side, and tendering thanks on the other. It's customary. But I was unaware that some of the most distinguished speakers in your Lordship's House, representing all the parties, the official parties, though some may be regarded as unofficial or semi-official, but let's not go into that controversy, have voiced their opinions. I am bound to say this, having listened, although I must, because of my defective hearing, have missed some of the observations, I can only read them in the pages of Hansard during the night when I do most of my reading, being unable to sleep, and always peruse the official documents, because that's where I get most of my information, and perhaps occasional wisdom. But as I was about to say, I'm bound to confess that you must have been making a mistake. There must have been somebody else you were referring to. All those generous words of commendation, retailing the records of a person, irrespective of the facts of life, but assuming that there are some individuals of such sanctity that they rarely make mistakes, that errors of judgment are not for them, that's going a bit too far. But however, I set that aside. It's a subject for controversy or for thought, perhaps more for thought than for controversy. And much of it, thought about, might enable us to be more wise in the future. However, one thing I must do, and that is to apologize to the government and to the opposition for my absence from the House. Nothing pleased me better than to be able to come down in the afternoon, look for the questions, look for the possibility of supplementary questions, of which I always became an authority. Not having much knowledge, one becomes an authority. Or believes oneself becomes an authority. Very fast of that. But I found it a great pleasure and a source of information, and moreover, far ahead of anything I may say in admiration, friendship achieved as a result from all quarters of the House. One feature of this assembly is that there are occasions when we can set politics aside, never allowing it to obtrude. And even when we do venture opinions, to see that it's not accompanied by malice. The term malice should never be in our minds. Controversy, yes. Disagreement, natural. That cannot be avoided as part of our democratic character and our philosophy. But no malice. Why should there be? The mere fact that somebody disagrees with me, is that a subject for malice? Annoyance? Of course not. That's what one expects. If everybody agreed with everybody else, what kind of a system would we be living in? We're hardly civilized. But some people who have ventured in utopias, Sir Thomas More, Mr. Adam Butler in Erewhon, and Mr. William Morris in the Unknown Church, and several others that members will recall, have ventured to infringe into utopia. But that sort of system is in the air. It doesn't really exist. We have to take facts as they are. But I apologize to all quarters of the House for my absence on the occasion when perhaps a word may have been useful, if not necessary. And indeed, that is all I have endeavored to do. And if I may say so, never sought to impose my views on other people, rather prefer to listen to what they had to say and debate the matter with them, and to prove just this, that perhaps I was a more effective debater than they were. And sometimes that happened, usually by accident. Or perhaps there was an audience behind me. Ah, that tells often. Nothing like having an audience behind you. I must confess, it's easier to get an audience behind you on the government side than the opposition side. We have our views about people, and some of them had better not be retailed. However, let me say, it is highly embarrassing to have one's record retailed in public. In general, yes, but not in detail. And I detect some of the implications. And I remember what they would say, but they are particularly generous this afternoon, so anxious to see reveal their compassion for an old dodger who's past his time, has nothing longer anything new to say. Oh, don't be so sure about that. But that's an idea that people have. I would say to you all, why not seek to emulate what I have achieved? Oh, when I use the term achieved, there's something wrong there. I have achieved nothing. It just happened. There was no guarantee about it. There was no expectation about it. On the contrary, the expectation, according to my medical advisors and consultants, it was going to be the other way around. 90 years, you've had it. And they were nearly right. Until I could leave the notion at the behest of a publisher to do another book, which I dictated from end to end, and it sold very well, and I made a bit of money. Now, on that subject, one must be very careful, making a bit of money. Some people think it's wrong to make a bit of money. There's nothing really wrong about it. What's wrong about making a bit of... It can be very useful. You try it. Or the other way around, you have none and see what happens. It can be full of problems, full of problems. And nobody knows more about problems than I do. Many problems. I have said to many of my friends who have come to see me during my illness, the pain, the complications involved, living alone, most unpleasant situation, I've said to them, if one is well, one can tackle almost anything. It could be finance, it could be your taxation. It could be the domestic issues. It could be the fact of living alone. It is the fact of losing one's friends and even in one's families. All that. This is quite natural and indeed inevitable in our life. But if one is well, one can tackle everything. And here I venture to mention just one thing which I ventured to touch upon early today, and that is the services that are rendered to every one of us at times, sometimes more, sometimes less, and sometimes it's inevitable from those in the medical profession, those in your Lordship's house, and those in our country. They are rendering a great service to society. Now, just a word about the future. About the house. Nothing wrong with it. I found it all right. It's been decent to me. Perhaps I haven't been as decent to them as I should be. But I found nothing wrong. When there's been talk about abolishing the House of Lords, my reply has been, sometimes even at Labour Party conferences, you've got to have another election before you do it. Of course, they always show that we're going to have another election, be successful. But it didn't happen. House of Lords goes on. And it's been going on all the time. Now, I admit, during my absence, I watched it very carefully from the pages of Hansard and from the press media. But I'm bound to say, apart from one or two incidents, not very startling, not very effective, not very troublesome, and indeed hardly necessary, the House has retained its dignity throughout. Not a single row, not a complaint, nothing derived from the football field, from the people in the galleries, nothing of that sort. The House has retained its dignity, and so it must remain. Now about the future. I look forward, members of the House of Lords, to a civilized society. When we speak of democracy, what do we really mean? Voting, elections, parties, governments? Not at all. We speak of a society that's highly civilized, that's well educated, not highly educated, but educated in general terms, so that people are well informed, that the average person in society can be as well informed as to enable that person to understand a member of Parliament when he states his policy and makes his promises. That's the kind of society. And a society where there is no pollution, where there's society where there is the highest form of sanitation, where there's society where hygiene counts above all else. That's the kind of society. Policy doesn't matter so much as those things. And one further point, behaviour. Now, I should be the last to boast about behaviour. For many times my behaviour has been, in my thoughts, shocking. It should never have happened. No restraint, just wanting my own way. Many of us are like that. As we grow older, we lose the need for aggression, for attack. We want to listen more, to learn more, to play our part in their civilized society. And one final word. If there is anything I have enjoyed in the last few days, when I was receiving hundreds and hundreds of cards and messages, until my bachelor flat is almost flooded out with them, with very useful gifts, and some perhaps I've never opened, and pray not find time to open this evening. When I received from some of my military friends, or past military friends, saying that I rendered some service to our country in time of need, I can say that is true. A patriot, what's wrong with it? Patriotism has been said to be the refuge of a scoundrel. Let them say what they like about it. But if one is a citizen of one's country and has an affection for one's country and hopes for the well-being for one's country, one seeks to avoid anything in the nature of insecurity and is entitled to resist aggression. In other words, no surrender. That is my policy. No surrender. Now, yes, negotiation, yes. Let's talk it out. Let's say to the Russes, place your cards on the table and place ours. See what we're driving at. No interference in domestic affairs. Domestic affairs are not Afghanistan. These are matters for the United Nations. That is the sort of policy we're going to... Behaviour, above all else. The House of Lords can pride itself of furnishing the correct behaviour which justifies an institution of our character.
Bruce of Dorrington.